So the All Blacks Rugby Championship squad is being announced tomorrow, and with that brings my very late All Blacks squad that I would like to see for the Rugby Championship. Now, the reason I've left it so late, first of all, a lot of injuries have been occurring over the last couple months, and also there was the round of the NPC, which is currently still active, and I was hoping to see certain players in action, see whether or not they could bump their way into my All Black squad. But jumping straight into it for the props, I have gone with Tamaiti Williams, Ethan de Groot, and Ollie Norris as my loose heads. Now, Tamaiti Williams just coming back from a meniscus injury, but he will be all right for the Rugby Championship as long as they haven't rushed him back into it, but he's certainly a threat in that front row. Ethan de Groot, I feel like throughout the Highlanders season, he wasn't really given the opportunity to shine, and now that he's back in the All Blacks kit, alongside some very strong forwards, he's looking the part. And at that number one, and then Ollie Norris, a youngster who got the opportunity in Scott Robertson's initial squad of 2025. I would definitely keep him in there and keep growing him into a great replacement loose head coming off the bench alongside a couple others. But now moving on to the tight heads, I have got Fletcher Newell, Pasilio Tosi, and if I was in charge, I would still select Tyrell Lomax, but the injury cover, just like I said, potentially Scott Robertson may do, is having George Dyer as that injury cover. So Dyer, he's been playing very well for the Chiefs throughout the year. He also has been training with the All Blacks, so it would make sense for him to be the guy that makes his way in. Marcel Renata, another option there at number 3. But I just have a little bit of a feeling they may go with Dyer here, and maybe they just straight select him rather than Tyrell Lomax. But I do think you want Lomax for those later games up against South Africa as well as the Australians. So that is why I'd have him as the third tight head prop. Moving on to the hookers, Cody Taylor is the first man on my list. I don't think that's any surprise whatsoever. He has been outstanding. He's getting closer and closer to those 100 caps for the All Blacks, which are thoroughly deserved. He was one of the best hookers in the world last year. Seems to be continuing that form, and with a very new-looking lineout for the All Blacks, I do think it's important to still have that fundamental hooker, and that is exactly what Cody Taylor gives you. In terms of the next hooker, Samisoni Taukei'aho, that impact bench that the All Blacks went with at times up against France, having Samisoni Taukei'aho, Ollie Norris, and Pasilio Tosi. That is a very young, dangerous trio that they could look to build towards future starters. I do think that there will be starting minutes, though, for those three, including Taukei'aho, who could find himself starting 1 or 2 matches of the Rugby Championship. But I do think he's definitely done enough to stay in the squad. Now, the third option here is a little bit tricky because Brodie McAllister only got himself 1 game throughout July, so he hasn't exactly been gifted a whole heap of minutes so far. You've got someone like a Safo Moore, who at this point in time, I don't think is quite back from his injury. He's getting extremely close, but he didn't play in that game for Wellington up against Canterbury. So maybe if he's only a few weeks away, they may look at selecting him in the Rugby Championship. Although I do think that Scott Robertson, he's got a very tricky decision to make because he's given McAllister 1 cap. So you would think that he had some sort of plan for him moving forward. Now, I have selected a Safo Moore in my All Black squad, although I'm thoroughly disappointed that they missed the opportunity to sign Ioane Moananu. Now, he has gone overseas for next season, which is a massive shame because had he been selected in the initial All Blacks naming, which honestly, he could have been a great bolter for the All Blacks, now he's gone overseas. So I feel like they dropped the ball a little bit with him. So they probably don't want to drop the ball with Brodie McAllister as well. But in this case, if I was in charge, I would have a Safo Moore back in there as he's just a dangerous ball runner. That physicality up front is something that the All Blacks will really want to show off throughout this Rugby Championship. And they will have to muscle up with some pretty big packs. So why not get a Safo Moore back in the All Blacks? Moving on to the locks. This is where I would pick 5 locks, mainly because of the reshuffle of Tupavai. But I've got Scott Barrett, Patrick Tuipulotu, Tupavai, Fabian Holland, and I would stick another lock in there, being Naitoa Akoi. Now, there's been a big debate about if the All Blacks do go with 5 locks, who would it be? Sam Derry, Josh Lord, or Naitoa Akoi? Now, Akoi has been training with the All Blacks throughout July. Josh Lord, he's been in and out of that environment quite frequently, and last year we did see Sam Derry in that All Black squad. So once again, big decisions for the selectors to make. The reason I would go with Naitoa Akoi though, for one, is his turnover ability, and also it kind of feels like he hasn't reached his full potential as of yet. Now, neither of the other two have either, but Sam Derry just coming back from a long-term injury. I know that Josh Lord is a bit of a 50-50 in terms of whether or not people want to see him in the All Black squad, but I do think that Naitoa Akoi throughout the Chiefs season did certainly enough to at least maybe get a chance for the All Blacks throughout this year. Plus, with the injuries that we've already seen of Scott Barrett and also Tupavai with that head knock, you definitely want that extra lock option in the Rugby Championship squad. So that is where I put Naitoa Akoi into my All Black squad. Moving on to the loose forwards. This is where I've gone a little bit different from what I predicted Scott Robertson would select. I've gone Ardie Savea, Samapeni Finau, Wallace Satiti, Duplessis Karefi, Christian Leo Willie, so all the same as what I said that Razor would go with. But these next two players, this is where I've thrown a little bit more of a curveball. In my Scott Robertson side, I did go with Ethan Blackadder and Dalton Papali'i, but neither of those two appear in my All Blacks team. I have got Simon Parker and Peter Lakai. Now, Lakai has just come back from what looked like a relatively serious injury, and already in the NPC, yes, it was a losing effort for Wellington up against Canterbury, but he was one of the busier players out there on the park. He made some solid tackles. He had a lot of carries throughout that match too, so straight away it seems like Peter Lakai is straight back to where he was before his injury, and if it's anything like last year, throughout the NPC, he would have insane numbers if he continued to play. He was right up there in quite a few stats for 2024. So why not get him in that All Blacks environment and have him creating those statistics at international level rather than NPC. Simon Parker, a man who was so unlucky with the timing of his injury just near the end of Super Rugby. Some felt he could have been a potential bolter. He's got the size, he's got the speed, and he does remind a lot of people of Liam Squire, that type of player, the physicality up front. So maybe Simon Parker wouldn't be a bad option at the moment. You could play him at 6, 7, or 8. He seems very versatile from what we've seen. So I would give him a chance in this All Blacks Rugby Championship squad. Moving on to the halfbacks, no matter what, it does seem like there will be a change here due to the injury of Noah Hotham. Going to leave him out for 7 to 8 weeks, so you're getting pretty deep in the Rugby Championship at that point. So I have gone Cam Roigard. I don't think there's any debate about that one. He is definitely going to be the first choice halfback for New Zealand throughout this year. He partners well with Beauden Barrett as that 9 and 10 combo, so maybe something we'll see Scott Robertson use a little more. Cortez Ratama as the second halfback that I would select. And then now the third option to select. There are about 4 players who could end up being selected. They are Finlay Christie, Xavier Rowe, Kyle Preston, or Falau Fakatava. Now, in my squad, I think I'll go with Kyle Preston. He does seem like a very young, promising talent. Plays for the Crusaders in Super Rugby, plays for Wellington in the Bunnings NPC. He does just seem to have that little bit of X factor about him. And I do think this is the perfect opportunity, just like what we saw for Noah Hotham last year with the Finlay Christie injury. This is the perfect opportunity to introduce another young player into that role. Now, there is a chance Razor goes with Finlay Christie because of that experience and having a few more caps under the belt heading into those Rugby Championship matches, but I would like to see that switch. Fakatava, who knows whether or not he's on Razor's radar, but for me, Preston certainly will be, and that is why I'd select him and my All Black squad. But moving on to the first fives, once again, just like Razor's team, no surprises here. Beauden Barrett, Damian McKenzie as the 2 first fives for the Rugby Championship. Now, Ruben Love might even find himself in that number 10 jersey at some point, but I do think the more likely is just 50-50 in terms of games for Beauden and Damien. Now, I will mention that Damian McKenzie, throughout that French series, did seem like a real impact player, making his way off the bench, but then Beauden Barrett last July was that impact player for the All Blacks up against England. So both of them play the bench role extremely well, which is a massive bonus, because either way you're going to have some sort of impact later on in a fixture, but I do think we will be seeing a lot of them throughout the rest of the year. Moving on to the centres, I have got Geordie Barrett, Quinn Tupaia, Billy Proctor, and Timothy Tavatavanawai. So unlike what the All Blacks will probably do here, I have not selected Anton Lienert-Brown. Now, that on the surface may sound harsh, definitely because that man is getting closer to his 100 caps. He's done a lot in that All Blacks jersey, but I just worry that lately he's been picking up a few too many injuries, even just over the weekend. He was supposed to be playing for Waikato, but had to pull out due to a different shoulder injury outside of his collarbone that he did initially injure for Super Rugby. So I do just wonder whether or not if you were to select him for the Rugby Championship, one big knock on the shoulder and he's out for a lot longer, and then you have to look at those injury replacements. It may just be best to select someone in an outside back role who can also cover in the number 13 jersey. But I do think that Jordie Barrett, he has thoroughly earned his spot in this All Blacks squad. He was phenomenal throughout the series up against France. The impact off the bench in the third test is what I believe saved New Zealand in that contest. He was solid in the first, solid in the second, and if it wasn't for that late injury change, we wouldn't have got to see Jordie Barrett in that third test, but he did end up showing exactly why he should definitely be there. Quintal Paia, I do think he went all right in that game up against France. I don't think it was absolutely insane, but he has still got a lot of potential in that 12 role. Timothy Tavatavanawai, those two both jockeying for that 12 jersey too. But the benefit that you've got with Timothy Tavatavanawai is he can also play out on the wing, so offers that little bit of versatility. And then of course Billy Proctor, he's the predominant outside centre at the moment for the All Blacks. Some people like that, some people don't, but he will take some time to be able to build into it, because we've got to remember, even though Proctor's been in that environment for last season as well as this year, he hasn't actually played that many minutes. In fact, I believe he had more minutes in the France series than he had all throughout last season for the All Blacks. So he will take time. He's still inexperienced when it comes to All Black caps, but give him some time and hopefully he does grow into the jersey. Moving on to the outside backs, this is where I have got Rieko Ioane, Sevu Reece, Emoni Narawa. So in my Scott Robertson prediction, I thought maybe they would go with Caleb Clark and have Narawa as his injury cover, but in my lineup, I would straight select Emoni Narawa. Caleb Clark, it's still quite a few weeks till he's able to return. And the thing is, if he does get back to 100%, have him train with the squad. Maybe even have him play in the NPC. And then if anyone gets injured, you can still bring Caleb Clark in. And I do feel like that door isn't completely closed for Clark's Rugby Championship, but I do just feel with how long he's going to be out, maybe you're better off straight up selecting someone else and giving them that opportunity. And then maybe Clark comes back in the November internationals. If he is 100%, another player that I've decided to give the opportunity to is Leroy Carter. Now, some people question his defense, and some people said about how he did disappear in some of the bigger games for the Chiefs throughout this year. But if you look through at what he did earlier on in the season, and also if you've been following this man for a while, what he's been able to do for the All Black Sevens, you would know this guy has a huge amount of talent. He is physical, he can win you the ball in the breakdown, and even though he's missed some tackles, he actually does have some very good defensive reads. We've seen it in the sevens. He has maybe just taken that little bit longer to adapt at times, definitely for that 50-22, something that wasn't a thing in sevens. So once his defense when it comes to reading kicks does improve that little bit more, I honestly think he will be an absolute superstar. So they don't want to miss that opportunity. Why not with one of your main wingers out? Why wouldn't you bring in Leroy Carter? See exactly what he can do. But the two fullbacks that I have got are Will Jordan and Ruben Love. No surprises there. We saw Ruben Love playing for the Lions in the Bunnings NPC. So I've actually added a few Lions players now that I think about it, with Preston as well as Peter Larkai, but at least they will have chemistry with Ruben Love. Will Jordan, he's a world-class player. He is definitely going to be there, so that is why I would 100% select him for my Rugby Championship squad as well. But like I mentioned, Scott Robertson, he will be announcing his side tomorrow. We will be doing the watch-along live stream with the announcement as well as a video straight afterwards. I had to leave this, like I said, as late as possible, just in case we saw any injuries, and honestly, we still might, because at the time of recording this, we don't know what's going to happen in that Bunnings NPC game between Tasman and Bay of Plenty, where we see Leroy Carter playing at number 13. He was the one I alluded to earlier on that does offer that outside centre cover. Same with Amoni Narawa, who is also going to be playing for Bay of Plenty. In the Tasman side of things, I believe Timothy Tavatava is in their lineup. Ethan Blackadder is in there as well, so perhaps that could have an impact on Scott Robertson's selections, but I am pretty happy with my side. Of course, there's a couple guys that could go in and out in terms of the selections, but overall, I think this would be a pretty strong All Blacks side heading into the Rugby Championship. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning in. Do let me know, of course, who you would like to see make it into the All Blacks for the announcement tomorrow. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.